The sun hung low over the red Arizona desert, spilling gold over the mesas like molten fire. The wind carried the songs of the canyon, soft, ancient, and mournful, whispering stories of love, loss, and the spirits of those who had walked before. It was a land that remembered everything, and it was in this land that a quiet cowboy named Eli Turner found himself riding toward fate. Eli wasn't the kind of man who chased glory. He'd once been a soldier, once seen men die in dust and fire, and since then he'd learned to live simply, with his horse, his worn saddle, and a soul that sought peace more than anything else. He worked the lonely ranches between the Rio Grande and the San Pedro, mending fences, taming horses, and sometimes just sitting beneath the stars talking to the silence. But that summer, when the heat shimmered across the horizon, something in the wind began to change his life forever. He'd first seen her near the river, the girl they called Nita, daughter of the great Apache leader, Chief Dawson. She was young, perhaps 20, but her spirit carried the strength of generations. She moved like water, calm, graceful, yet unstoppable. Eli had been filling his canteen by the river when he heard her singing in her language, her voice soft as a prayer, and when she looked up, the world stilled for a moment. Her eyes were dark as obsidian, and they held the mystery of the desert night. She didn't speak to him that day, only watched him quietly, as if trying to read the shape of his soul. He tipped his hat, murmured a polite, "Ma'am," and rode on, thinking he'd never see her again. But destiny, like the desert, has a way of pulling people together. Weeks passed, and Eli heard stories traveling through the canyons. They said Chief Dawson had announced that 12 of the strongest warriors from neighboring Apache bands would compete for his daughter's hand, a test of skill, courage, and heart. The girl's choice would seal alliances and strengthen the tribe's future. Every warrior dreamed of her, not only for her beauty but for her spirit, which shone brighter than the morning sun. Eli listened to these tales by campfires, staring into the flames, wondering why they stirred something restless inside him. He told himself it wasn't his business. He wasn't Apache, he wasn't even from this land. But that night he dreamed of her again, standing by the river, her song echoing through the valley. Fate came for him at dawn. He found himself riding near the Apache camp after delivering horses to a nearby settlement. When he stopped to water his mare, he noticed a young boy struggling with an injured colt. Eli dismounted, gentle and patient, and showed the boy how to calm the creature, speaking softly as he wrapped its leg with his scarf. When the boy ran off to fetch his father, Eli turned and found Chief Dawson himself watching. The chief, tall and silent, looked at the cowboy with a gaze that pierced deeper than words. "You have a kind spirit," he said slowly in English, though the accent carried the weight of his people's dignity. "Few men show mercy to the weak." Eli simply nodded, tipping his hat. "Ain't much to it, Chief. Just seems right." Dawson studied him for a long time, then motioned toward the camp where preparations for the great challenge had begun. "Stay," he said, "be our guest. The land brought you here for a reason." That evening, the fires burned bright against the darkening sky. Drums echoed through the desert, carrying the heartbeat of the tribe. 12 warriors stood in a circle, proud, fierce, their faces painted with war markings. They were men of skill and honor, each representing a band that had come to win Nita's hand. And among them, standing apart, was Eli Turner, the quiet cowboy who didn't belong. The chief had invited him to watch, but whispers spread through the crowd. "Why is the white man here?" Some asked. "He does not belong to our blood." Yet Nita said nothing. She stood beside her father, her gaze scanning the circle of men, and when it met Eli's, something in her expression softened, almost like recognition. The trials began at dawn. They tested strength, endurance, courage, and wisdom. The first challenge was the race, a wild sprint across the desert with the sun blazing overhead. Horses thundered through the dust as warriors shouted their war cries. Eli didn't intend to join, but when one of the horses broke free and a boy nearly fell under its hooves, Eli spurred his mare forward, catching the animal and guiding it back with skill that made even the warriors pause in respect. "He rides like he was born of the wind," someone murmured. Nita smiled quietly from where she stood. The second trial tested courage. Each man had to cross the canyon rope bridge at night to retrieve a feather placed on a high rock, with the river raging below. One warrior fell, saved only by his brothers. Eli didn't wish to compete, but when a storm broke and lightning cracked the sky, the last feather nearly flew into the river. Without thinking, Eli leapt forward, crawling across the swaying bridge to catch it before it vanished. When he returned, soaked and breathless, he handed it not to the chief but to the young warrior who had fallen earlier. "This was yours to win," he said simply. The tribe fell silent. That small act, humility over pride, reached deeper than any show of strength. The final test was of the spirit, to face the sacred mountain alone and return with something that carried meaning. Warriors brought stones, feathers, and bones, each symbolizing courage or power. Eli returned empty-handed. When Chief Dawson asked why, Eli looked toward Nita and then back to the sky. "Sir," he said softly, "everything that matters can't be carried in a hand. Sometimes it's in what we leave behind, not what we take." The old chief studied him for a long moment, then nodded with quiet understanding. "You speak like a man who has walked many roads." When the sun set on the third day, the ceremony began. The warriors stood proud in a half-circle before the fire. The chief raised his staff and spoke, his voice deep and steady. "You have all shown courage and honor. My daughter will now choose her path." The drums fell silent. All eyes turned to Nita as she stepped forward, the firelight painting her face in shades of gold and shadow. Her hands trembled slightly, though her voice was clear. She walked past the first warrior, then the second, her gaze lingering on each face. The men stood tall, chest swelling with pride, until she stopped before Eli Turner, the quiet cowboy who had never once fought for her hand. The crowd murmured in confusion. Eli's hat was in his hands, his eyes lowered out of respect. "Miss," he said quietly, "you don't owe me nothing. I didn't come here to," but she silenced him with a look. "You came here because your heart is true," she said softly. The others showed their strength. "You showed your soul." Then she turned to her father and, in a voice that carried across the wind, declared, "I choose the one who did not fight, because he is the only one who understood peace." For a long moment, there was silence. Then, slowly, Chief Dawson smiled, not with surprise, but with something deeper, like a man who had seen prophecy fulfilled. "The heart chooses where blood cannot," he said. "So it shall be." The warriors bowed their heads in respect. No one protested, for though Eli was not of their blood, every man there had seen his spirit, and in that moment, he belonged more truly than any. The days that followed were filled with both celebration and challenge. Some questioned the union. Could a cowboy and an Apache girl truly live between two worlds? But love, when it is born of respect, finds a language beyond words. Eli learned her people's ways, how to track the stars, how to read the wind, how to listen to silence. And Nita learned his, how to ride free across the plains, how to laugh without fear, how to find beauty in the smallest moments. Together they built a bridge between two worlds that had always stood apart. But peace is never without cost. One night, a band of raiders came, men from the border who sought to drive the Apache from their lands. The village awoke to smoke and screams. Eli fought beside the warriors, his rifle steady, his heart fierce. When the battle ended, the raiders fled, leaving behind a scarred earth but unbroken spirits. Chief Dawson, wounded yet proud, placed his hand on Eli's shoulder. "You have defended not just my people, but my daughter's heart," he said. "From this day, you are of us." Months turned into years. The cowboy and the Apache girl became legend. Travelers spoke of them, how they rode together through the canyons, how they tended to the wounded, how they built peace between settlers and tribes where there had only been hate. Their love was quiet, steadfast, like the mountains themselves, never needing to prove its strength, only to live it. And though time weathered their faces and silvered their hair, the fire between them never faded. When Chief Dawson grew old, he called for Eli and Nita one last time. "The land remembers kindness," he told them. "When two hearts walk in truth, even the spirits watch in awe." Then he gave Eli his father's eagle feather, the symbol of unity, and told Nita, "Your choice brought peace to more than one heart." Years later, when the chief had passed and the tribe had moved north, travelers who rode through that desert sometimes said they saw two riders at dusk, a man in a weathered hat and a woman with long dark hair flowing in the wind, riding side by side through the canyon. They said you could hear her laughter echoing softly and his voice calling her name across the wind. Some swore it was just the breeze playing tricks. But the elders knew better. They said love that true never dies, it becomes part of the land itself, whispered forever by the wind that once brought a cowboy and an Apache girl together. And if you ever stand by that river at sunset, when the sky burns with gold and the world holds its breath, you might still hear her song, the same one that began it all, carrying across the water like a blessing. Because sometimes, the greatest battles aren't won with strength or swords, but with the quiet courage to love beyond boundaries, to see a soul instead of a skin, to choose peace when the world demands war. And in that endless desert where time stands still, the land still remembers the day when 12 warriors fought for the Apache girl's hand, but she pointed at the cowboy alone.